The Battle of the Denmark Strait was a Second World War naval battle between ships of the Royal Navy and the German Kriegsmarine, fought on 24 May 1941. The British battleship HMS Prince of Wales and the battlecruiser HMS Hood fought the German battleship Bismarck and the heavy cruiser Prinz Eugen, both of which were attempting to break out into the North Atlantic to attack Allied merchant shipping. Less than 10 minutes after the British opened fire, a shell from Bismarck struck Hood near her aft ammunition magazines. Soon afterward, Hood exploded, and sank within 3 minutes with the loss of all but 3 of her crew. Prince of Wales continued to exchange fire with Bismarck but suffered serious malfunctions in her main armament as the British battleship had not fully worked up after only being completed in late March 1941 and soon broke off the engagement. The battle was considered a major tactical victory for the Germans, but its impact was short-lived. The damage done to Bismarck's forward fuel tanks forced the abandonment of her Atlantic breakout mission and necessitated an escape to safe dry dock facilities in occupied France, producing an operational victory for the British. Incensed by the loss of Hood, a large British force pursued and sank Bismarck 3 days later. Background: the two German ships were expected to sail westward and break through the Greenland-Iceland-UK gap. While passing neutral Sweden in the Baltic Sea, the ships were spotted and reported by the Swedish cruiser Gotland and patrol planes. These reports were intercepted by the British Embassy, allowing Royal Navy ships to watch the probable route. Due to cloud and rain, aircraft scheduled to assist in the search could not, so when the German ships attempted the breakout on the evening of the 23rd of May, despite the advantage of inclement weather to cloak the Germans' presence, the two ships were spotted steaming at 27 knots by the British heavy cruisers HMS Norfolk and Suffolk. These cruisers, each carrying 8 8-inch guns, were patrolling the Denmark Strait under the command of Rear Admiral Frederick Wake Walker. With the help of Suffolk's newly installed radar, the cruisers shadowed the German ships, reporting on the movements throughout the night. The next morning, at the exit to the strait between Iceland and Greenland, a force of 8 British ships was in place to intercept the Germans. The British fleet included the battleship Prince of Wales, the battlecruiser HMS Hood and a screen of 6 destroyers, under the command of Vice Admiral Lancelot Holland in Hood. Prince of Wales was a newly commissioned King George V-class battleship, similar to Bismarck in size and power. Prince of Wales had not yet been properly shaken down, and her crew was inexperienced. She still had mechanical problems, especially with her main armament. The ship had sailed with shipyard workers still aboard working on her. For 20 years after her commissioning in 1920, Hood was the largest and heaviest warship in the world, combining 8 massive BL 15-inch MKI naval guns with a top speed greater than any battleship on the sea. Hood was the pride of Great Britain's navy, and embodied the world dominance of British naval power. Despite this, Hood had one conspicuous flaw as compared to the super dreadnought battleships she served alongside. As a battlecruiser, much of her bulk was dedicated to extra engine power instead of comprehensive armor coverage. This was in accordance with the prevailing theory originally propounded by First Sea Lord Jackie Fisher that speed is armor. While her 12-inch belt armor was considered sufficient against most capital ships she was likely to encounter, her 3 inches of deck armor was only rated against shell splinters, leaving her badly unprotected against plunging fire at long range. At the time of her commissioning in World War I, naval gunnery was severely inaccurate at the ranges necessary to produce plunging fire, and Hood's greater speed and maneuverability were rightly seen as an acceptable trade-off. However, as the accuracy of naval gunfiring increased in the interwar period. Hood was eventually scheduled to receive an upgrade in 1939 that would have doubled her deck armor to 6 inches, but the outbreak of World War II meant the upgrade never took place. She thus sorted to war at a marked disadvantage against the new capital ships of the Axis. Aware of Hood's inadequate protective armor, distant to the southeast of where the battle took place, Vice Admiral Holland's superior deliberated on ordering Vice Admiral Holland to have Prince of Wales sail ahead of Hood. With the ships in this position, Admiral Tovey concluded the better protected Prince of Wales could draw the German battleship's large shell gunfire. Ultimately, Admiral Tovey did not give the order, later saying, "I did not feel such interference with such a senior officer justified." Prelude. Plan gone awry. Vice Admiral Holland's battle plan was to have Hood and Prince of Wales engage Bismarck while Suffolk and Norfolk engaged Prince Eugen. He signalled this to Captain John C. Leach of Prince of Wales but did not radio Rear Admiral Wade Walker, who as commander of the 1st Cruiser Squadron directed Suffolk and Norfolk, for fear of disclosing his location. Instead, he observed radio silence. Holland hoped to meet the enemy at approximately 2 o'clock. Sunset in this latitude was at 1:51. Bismarck and Prince Eugen would be silhouetted against the sun's afterglow while Hood and Prince of Wales could approach rapidly, unseen in the darkness, to a range close enough not to endanger Hood with plunging fire from Bismarck. The Germans would not expect an attack from this quarter, giving the British the advantage of surprise. The plan's success depended on Suffolk's continually unbroken contact with the German ships. However, Suffolk lost contact from 0:28. For 90 minutes, Holland neither sighted the German ships nor received any further news from Norfolk or Suffolk. Reluctantly, Holland ordered Hood and Prince of Wales to turn south-southwest, but he detached his destroyers which continued searching to the north. Before contact was re-established, the two squadrons missed each other by a hair's breadth. Had the German ships not altered course to the west at 1:41 to follow the line of the Greenland ice pack, the British would have intercepted them much earlier than they did. The British destroyers were just 10 miles to the southeast when the Germans made this course change. If the visibility had not been reduced to 3 to 5 miles, the German vessels would probably have been spotted distant on the horizon, and if the ship's lookouts are in a crow's nest, the observable distance is even further. Just before 3 o'clock, Suffolk regained contact with Bismarck. Hood and Prince of Wales were 35 miles away, slightly ahead of the Germans. Holland signalled to steer toward the Germans and increase speed to 28 knots. Suffolk's loss of contact had placed the British at a disadvantage. Instead of the swiftly closing head-on approach Holland had envisioned, he would have to converge at a wider angle, much more slowly. This would leave Hood vulnerable to Bismarck's plunging shells for a much longer period. The situation worsened further when, at 3:20, Suffolk reported that the Germans had made a further course alteration to the west, placing the German and British squadrons almost abeam of each other. At 5:35, lookouts on Prince of Wales spotted the German ships 17 miles away. The Germans, already alerted to the British presence through the hydrophonic equipment, picked up the smoke and masts of the British ships 10 minutes later. At this point, Holland had the option of joining Suffolk in shadowing Bismarck and waiting for Tovey to arrive with King George V and other ships to attack to order his squadron into action. He chose the latter at 5:37. The rough seas in the Strait kept the destroyers' roll to a minimum, and the cruisers Norfolk and Suffolk would be too far behind the German force to reach the battle. Opening moves. Hood opened fire at 5:52 at a distance of approximately 26,500 yards. Holland had ordered firing on the leading ship, Prince Eugene, believing from her position that she was Bismarck. Holland soon amended his order and directed both ships to engage the rear ship, Bismarck. Prince of Wales had already correctly identified and targeted Bismarck, whereas Hood is believed to have continued to fire at Prince Eugene for some time. Holland, himself a gunnery expert, was well aware of the danger posed by Hood's weak horizontal protection. Therefore, he wanted to reduce the range as quickly as possible. At a shorter range, the trajectory of Bismarck's shells would be flatter and they would be more likely to hit the sides of the ship rather than the decking, or to glance off the top deck. However, he closed the range at an angle that placed the German ships too far forward of the beam. This meant he could use only 10 of his capital ships' 18 heavy guns while presenting the Germans more at which to aim than necessary. Those 10 guns became 9 when a defect in one of Prince of Wales's forward guns rendered it inoperative after the first salvo. Both Suffolk and Norfolk attempted to engage Bismarck during the action, but both were out of range and neither cruiser had sufficient speed advantage over Bismarck to rapidly close the range during the brief engagement. The Germans also had the weather gauge, meaning that the British ships were steaming into the wind, spray drenching the lenses of Prince of Wales air turrets 42 feet bar and Stroud coincidence rangefinder, and both British ships B turret 30 feet rangefinders. This necessitated using the shorter-based ones in the director towers instead. In addition, Admiral Holland had Prince of Wales stay close to Hood, conforming to Hood's movements instead of varying course and speed. This made it easier for the Germans to find the range to both British ships, although it would have aided Holland's gunners if they had both fired upon Bismarck as originally planned, since they could then precisely time each other's salvos to avoid mistaking one ship's fire for the other. They could also use concentration fire, where both ships' main armament salvos would be controlled by one ship's fire control computer, probably Prince of Wales's modern Admiralty fire control table. Prince of Wales struck her target first. She would ultimately hit Bismarck 3 times. One shell struck the commander's boat and put the seaplane catapult amidships out of action. The second shell passed through the bow from one side to the other without exploding. The third struck the hull underwater and burst inside the ship, flooding a generator room and damaging the bulkhead to an adjoining boiler room, partially flooding it. These last 2 hits caused damage to Bismarck's machinery and medium flooding. More importantly, the damage to the bow cut access to 1,000 long tons of fuel oil in the forward fuel tanks. It also caused Bismarck to leave a visible oil slick and reduced her speed by 2 knots. Bismarck was soon listing 9 degrees to port and lost 2 meters of freeboard at her bow. The Germans held their fire until 5:55, when both German ships targeted Hood. Admiral Lütjens, the German fleet chief and task force commander, did not immediately give the order to commence firing. Not until he had made multiple inquiries did Bismarck's first gunnery officer Korvettenkapitän Adalbert Schneider, Frage für Erlaubnis. The commander of Bismarck, Captain C. Ernst Lindemann, impatiently responded, "Ich lasse mir doch nicht mein Schiff unter dem Arsch wegschießen. Für Erlaubnis." A shell hit Hood's boat deck, starting a sizable fire in the ready-use 4-in ammunition stored there. But this fire did not spread to other areas of the ship or cause the later explosion. Although unconfirmed, it is possible that Hood was struck again at the base of her bridge and in her foretop radar director. There has been some contention over which German vessel struck Hood at this time. Prinz Eugen, under the command of Captain Sir C. Helmut Brinkmann, was targeting Prince of Wales by this stage, following an order from the fleet commander. However, Prinz Eugen's gunnery officer, Paul Schmalenbach, is quoted as confirming that Prinz Eugen's target was Hood. Sinking of Hood at 6 o'clock, Holland ordered his force to turn once again to port to ensure that the aft main guns on both Hood and Prince of Wales could bear on the German ships. During the execution of that turn, a salvo from Bismarck, fired at a range of about 9 miles, was seen by men aboard Prince of Wales to straddle Hood abreast her mainmast. It is likely that one 38 cm shell struck somewhere between Hood's mainmast and X-turret aft of the mast. This was immediately followed by a huge pillar of flame that shot upward, like a giant blowtorch, in the vicinity of the mainmast. There followed an explosion that destroyed a large portion of the ship from amidships clear to the rear of Y turret, blowing both after turrets into the sea. The ship broke in two, the stern falling away and sinking. Ted Briggs, one of the survivors, claimed the Hood heeled to 30 degrees, at which point we knew she just wasn't coming back. The bow was raised clear of water, pointed upward and pivoting about, and followed the stern in sinking shortly thereafter. A turret did manage to fire one last salvo while in this upright position, possibly from the doomed gun crew. Just before the bow section sank, splinters rained down on Prince of Wales. 5 miles away, Hood sank in about 3 minutes, taking 1,415 men, including Vice Admiral Holland, with her. Only 3 of her crew survived to be rescued 2 hours later by the destroyer HMS Electra. The British Admiralty later concluded that the most likely explanation for the loss of Hood was a penetration of her magazines by a single 38 cm shell from Bismarck, causing the subsequent catastrophic explosion. Recent research by submersible craft suggests that the initial explosion was in the aft 4-in magazine and that it spread to the 15-in magazines via the ammunition trunks. It has been suggested from examination of the wreckage found in 2001 that the magazine explosion in the 4-in armament near the mainmast caused the vertical blast of flame seen there, and this in turn ignited the magazines of the aft 15-in guns that caused the explosion that wrecked the stern. This explosion might have traveled through the starboard fuel tanks, igniting the fuel oil there, setting off the forward magazines and completing the destruction of the ship. The wreck of Hood revealed the bow section bereft of any structure. A huge section of her side is missing, from the A barbette to the foredeck. The midship section had its plates curled outward. Moreover, the main parts of the forward structure, including the 600 long tons conning tower, were found about 1.1 kilometers away from the main wreckage. This has sparked theories that the 15-in forward magazines exploded as a result of the force, flames and pressure caused by the detonation of the aft magazines. However, a team of marine forensic scientists has found that implosion damage to the forward hull due to the rapid sinking of the Hood is the most likely cause of the state of the forward hull, and they do not support any theory that the forward magazines exploded. Prince of Wales alone. Prince of Wales found herself steering towards the sinking Hood. Her commanding officer, Captain Leach, ordered an emergency avoidance turn away from Hood's wreckage. This violent change of course disrupted her aim and put her in a position that made it easier for the Germans to target her. She resumed her previous course, but was now under the concentrated fire of both German ships. Prince of Wales was struck 4 times by Bismarck and 3 times by Prinz Eugen. One shell passed through her upper superstructure, killing or wounding several crewmen in the compass platform and air defense platform. Pieces of another shell struck her radar office aft, killing the crewman within. A 20.3 cm shell from Prince Eugen found its way to the propelling charge round manipulation chamber below the aft 5.25 in gun turrets, and a 38 cm shell from Bismarck hit underwater below the armor belt, penetrating about 13 feet into the ship's hull, about 25 feet below the waterline, but was stopped by the anti-torpedo bulkhead. Fortunately for Prince of Wales, neither shell exploded, but she still suffered minor flooding and the loss of some fuel oil. Contrary to some mistaken opinion, the 38 cm shell that struck Prince of Wales below the waterline did not endanger her magazines, as it came to rest abreast an auxiliary machinery room. By this time, serious gunnery malfunctions had caused intermittent problems with the main armament, leading to a 26% reduction in output. Captain Leach realized that continuing the action would risk losing Prince of Wales without inflicting further damage on the enemy. He therefore ordered the ship to make smoke and withdraw, pending a more favorable opportunity. Prince of Wales turned away just after 6:04, firing from her rear turret under local control until the turret suffered a jammed shell ring, cutting off the ammunition supply and making the guns inoperable. Despite efforts by crew members and civilian technicians to repair the shell ring, all 4 guns were not back in service until 8:25, although 2 of the 4 guns were serviceable by 7:20. This temporarily left only 514 in guns operational, but 9 of the 10 were operational in 5 hours. The final salvos fired were ragged and are believed to have fallen short. The ship retired from the battle around 6:10. 13 of her crew had been killed, 9 were wounded. The timing of Prince of Wales's withdrawal was fortunate for her, as she had come into torpedo range of Prince Eugen and turned away as the German cruiser was about to fire, breaking off the action. On Bismarck, there was tremendous elation at the sinking of Hood. There was also a keen expectation that they would close on Prince of Wales and possibly finish her off. Bismarck's captain, Ernst Lindemann, requested that Admiral Lutyens allow Bismarck to do just that. Even if British Admiral John Tovey's squadron had left Scapa Flow the previous day, he would still be more than 300 nm away from Bismarck, even if Bismarck diverted to sink Prince of Wales. Lutyens refused to allow Lindemann to give chase, giving no explanation. Lindemann repeated his request, this time more assertively. Lutyens held firm to orders from the German naval commander, Gross Admiral Erich Raeder, to avoid unnecessary combat with the Royal Navy, especially when it could lead to further damage that could hasten delivering Bismarck toward the waiting hands of the British. He broke off combat instead of pursuing Prince of Wales and ordered a course of 270 degrees due west. Bismarck had fired 93 of her 353 base-fused armor-piercing shells during the engagement. This clash between the 2 senior German officers reflected the disparate and distinct command functions. As commander of Bismarck, Lindemann operated first and foremost as her tactician. As such, he had no doubt that his ship's immediate objective was to destroy Prince of Wales, and he had pressed his case as far and hard as he should. Lutyens, as fleet chief and task force commander, operated at the strategic and operational levels. To some degree, his orders were clear: attacking convoys was his priority, not risking a major engagement for limited and perhaps uncertain goals. Nevertheless, Raeder had also ordered Lutyens to be bold and imaginative, to accept battle if unavoidable, and conduct it vigorously to the finish. The The reality was that Lütjen's orders did not cover a spectacular success like the one just achieved. His priority therefore was to stick to his instructions, to concentrate on sinking merchant shipping and avoid encounters with enemy warships, whenever possible. Moreover, before leaving Germany, Lütjens had told Admirals Konrad Patzig and Wilhelm Marschall that he would adhere to raiders' directives. This meant he did not intend to become the Third Fleet Chief to be relieved for contradicting raiders' orders. Marschall, one of his two predecessors, had been relieved of command for not following his orders to the letter, despite the fact that Marschall's analysis of the changes in the tactical situation since the orders were issued resulted in the sinking of the British aircraft carrier HMS Glorious and its two escorting destroyers. Nor was he predisposed to discuss his command decisions with a subordinate officer, even if he had known it was the untried Prince of Wales he was fighting and not King George V. Lütjens would probably have stuck to his decision. Following her would have meant exposing the squadron to further gunfire as well as to torpedo attacks from Norfolk and Suffolk. He would have risked his ships and crews on an expressly forbidden opportunity. Between 6:19 and 6:25, Suffolk fired 6 salvos in the direction of Bismarck, having mistaken a radar contact with an aircraft for Bismarck. Suffolk was actually out of gun range of both Bismarck and Prinz Eugen at the time.